In this video, I'm going to go through the assessments that are featured in the word analysis chapter that relate to word identification, spelling, or orthography, and then there's some sentence dictation assessments. So we'll cover first the graded reading words assessment. I would love to see you all give this assessment to your focus students. I think it's a really good choice. And I'll explain why as we dig in. So what you see on the screen is the assessment PDF that has the record forms for this assessment. And what you need to know about this assessment is that there's two different sets of materials. One set for you as the teacher. This is the scoring form. It of course has the directions, the scoring and analysis techniques, and then the functioning levels, just like all of the other assessments we've looked at in this text. And then after it is the word reading, the word list for the students. This is what the students would read. So they would go down the list like this, and it corresponds with you going across the list like this, which is a little bit confusing. The student reads down and you write across. It requires a little bit of brain coordination there. But this is what you would give to the student to put in front of them, give them a card so that they can cover up the words they're not reading and help them to understand that they're reading down the word list. And you can even cut up the list so they're only seeing one at a time. And each column corresponds to the different level of reading list. And each list you'll see has 20 words that the student will read for you. Another thing in the text, they offer up that you can also give students what's called Fry's word lists, and they tell you in the text on page 134 that these can be found at citewords.com. And so I just wanted to show you that website. It's here. The home page actually looks like this. This is where you land, and then if you go to CiteWords and you go to Fry, and then you go to their word lists, you can click more and it will show you all of the words. What's different about the Fry lists is that there are 100 words. They're the most high frequency, phonetically regular, and sometimes irregular words for each of the grade levels. So you're gonna see that they're by grade level, there are all the way up to 10th grade word lists, and there's a lot more. And what you would do for this, you can click on the PDF and take a peek. You again would either give the student the list like this, but there's actually some good advice in the textbook that says if your student is an emergent reader or working on the pre-primer or one of the early word lists, and maybe handing them that word list would feel overwhelming, it says that you can actually give the students the words on index cards. So it says for an emergent reader, write the words on index cards and give them one at a time. To the student. So it's your preference. You can give Fry, you can give what's in our textbook. I like the textbook one for a couple of reasons. One, it's shorter. Two, it's got a nice scoring sheet to go right along with it. And three, it uses the same consistent scoring techniques that we've used for the rest of the assessments in this text. So go ahead and use that one if that feels good to you. So these word lists are used to identify your students' known sight words, strategies that they're using while they're decoding, patterns of miscues or mistakes that they're making, as well as their knowledge of the phoneme and grapheme relationship. Remember, that's the sound that the letter makes attached to the actual letter in print. I'm reading from the text. On page 134 in the textbook, it starts the procedures. So here's the procedures if you're giving the graded reading word list. So you select the list that is at least 2 grade levels below a student's current grade level unless there's evidence to show that they would be even farther below that. So if you are working with a student who's in 1st grade, you would actually start 2 lists behind that. So this is primer is kindergarten, pre-primer is pre-K, so you would start with that word list. And again, that idea here is that you're gonna capture their true ability level. If they are reading a little bit below grade level, you're capturing it by going 2 below where they're at in school, and then also it builds their confidence to start with an easier list. It says it's beneficial to provide a bookmark or an index card for the student to keep their place. That's a great idea. And then the index card trick for the emergent readers. The teacher should record all of the students' responses on this sheet. And then it gives you a little script for what you are to say. So the teacher says, read each word, and this of course appears at the top as well. Read each word and then move the card down to the next word in the column. I cannot help you. If you don't know a word, try to figure it out. I'm going to write down everything that you say. And I like that it tells you to tell the student that they're going to see you writing so that they're not preoccupied with your writing and they can really get into the task of reading the words for you. Then you're going to record all of the students' responses, and it's got a little system for you, and it's also noted here in the scoring and analysis. So if the word is read correctly, you're just going to put a plus sign, and you don't have to write anything else. So if the student reads the word A and it's read correctly, I'm going to grab my writing tool. If they read A correctly, you're just going to give them a plus sign. If the student substitutes a word for what is supposed to be there, then you can write it. It says write it above, but I feel like there's not a whole lot of space there. So what you would do is mark it as, let's say instead of to, they say at, and then you would give them a minus. So I would just write it next to it instead of above it. That's fine. A minus sign is used for an incorrect word. And let's say the word is in and they say an, and then they say in and they self-correct. You're welcome to use their system, which is to give it then a check mark. So self-corrections get a check mark. You could also, if you wanted to, use the pretty much the universal self-correct symbol, which is to write SC. So SC kind of universally stands for self-correct. I'm not super picky about the format that you use as long as it's pretty self-evident for me if you're using the check mark, their system, or if you're going to use SC for self-correct, and that you use it consistently. So that's the basic marking. If they miss it, you're going to put what they said and give them a minus. If they miss it, you're going to put what they said. If they self-correct it, you'll give them the check mark or the SC there. So the other thing that they want you to note is this is a test also for their automaticity, and that means how quickly, how automatically they can recognize a word. And in this program, they say anything under 2 seconds is considered automatic. So if they get to the word here is, and they stare at it, and you know they're working on it, and it takes them 3-ish seconds, and then they say is, how you're going to note that is put a slash for every 2 seconds that they don't respond. And then if they ultimately get the word, they wait 2 seconds and then they say is, you give them that plus mark. Another thing you might see is if the student hesitates a little or sounds the word out. So if they get to this one and they go, ha, ha, he, and ultimately they get it, I would also include, because there were some pretty big pauses there, I would phonetically spell out everything that they said. So they said ha, ha, he, and then ultimately you want to make sure that the student in this case would get a check mark because they did some attempting, they took a lot of time on that one. So ultimately they got it right, but it was not automatic. What's important to know here is not perfection. You don't need to have perfection, but 2 things. You want to, 1, make sure that you note every single thing that comes out of the student's mouth or doesn't come out of their mouth in the sense of pauses. So every sound they make, every utterance, every sound out, you want to make sure you're capturing that here. And then the second thing is a plus sign is used if it's automatic and correct. Under 2 seconds, no hesitation, they immediately, boom, get it. That's considered an automatic word. And the check mark is pretty much for everything else that's correct. If they're sounding it out, if they pause a lot, if they make a mistake and then fix it, you're always going to give it that check mark Check mark is used for correct but not automatic. And then the only other option is they missed the word. You're going to note what they say and give it a minus. And that's the basic scoring of all the assessments that we're going to talk about here in this set, and a lot of the assessments in the McAndrews text in general. So those are the 3 ways to score. And the first way, that plus sign, the automatic recognition, that automaticity, that's called the automatic score. So if you finish this group of words and the student has 10 check marks, the automatic score would be 10 here. And then let's say along with those 10 check marks, the student also was able to read 5 more. So then this would be 50% is their automatic score because they're able to get 10. And then you would do their total score would be a 15 out of 20 over here. And then the functioning level is always determined, just like normal with this program, is determined here by the range that you're given. So if they've got a 15 on the total score, you can see that that would be in their independent range. And so you would just mark it independent. And this list would be independent for the student, and you would continue on administering the assessment. So if there's a couple rules about what to do with that score. So if the student scores at or above a 70% on a given list, then that's a sign for you to go up to the next list. If the student scores below a 70% on a list, then it says the teacher goes to the previous list unless you already assessed it. So you're going to go until you get to that 70% mark. And so on this assessment, we got 15 out of 20. That is 75%. You'll have to do some math right there. So make sure you've got your calculator and you're able to calculate that in front of the student, because that will tell you if you're going to keep going. So this is an independent level, so I would continue on with the student because they're at 75%. And it's a good idea to know that kind of going into the assessment, that in this case, it says on page 135 that the 70 to 89 range would be 14 to 17. So that's just a good thing to make note of before you go into the field. Okay, anything less than 14 right, and I'm going to have to give another list. So in this case, anything less than 14 correct, and I stop assessing. Anything more than 14 and I give another list. So in this case, it's at 75%, which is above 70. You would give the next list and continue until you reach that frustration level. Basically what they're saying is if the student is at the frustration level, you would stop assessing for them. Okay, let me check the text and make sure I got everything here. On page 135 of the text, it does give a nice reminder that the patterns that you capture here in this assessment of their phoneme and grapheme relationships, you could also document that on that individual phonics summary. You could also look back to their previous assessments that you gave. Remember that individual phonics, the individual phonics summary was back here, and it was just sort of an inventory of what your student's able to do or not able to do, and you could use that assessment here again to make note and keep that catalog of what your student is able to do. So that's how you would give the graded reading word list. It does require you to do a little bit of math in the moment with the student there so that you know if you're going to go up or down. And actually just using the functioning level, you can really quickly determine it. So you have to do some totaling as you're in the moment so that you know what your total score is. And based on that total score, looking at this, if they're frustration level 13 or below for this assessment, you're going to stop. Otherwise, you're going to keep giving them assessments. Also, if they're at the frustration level, and let's say you were working with a 5th grader, so you started on grade 3, you would drop back. So you're always looking for that independent level. You want to make sure you always get, instructional. You're always looking for the student's instructional level because that's where you come in with your instruction. What's on page 66 of this is the coding and scoring of oral reading behaviors guide. This will become more important to us as we go into our running record training, and actually this program is a little bit different than the one I'm going to show you, but it's just a reminder that you're using a plus or a check sign for if they're correct. If they're substituting, you're writing the word. You can also, this might be helpful on this assessment, if your student reads a word with a different vowel sound. So let's say they get to the word, let's see, dog, and instead of dog, they read dog. They give that O, a long O sound. You would make note of that. Oh, I don't remember how to do I don't think it's engaged in this application, but you would want to handwrite that in so that you make note that it's long O here, because it looks exactly the same. You could always just type long O like I just did. So if they pronounce it with a different vowel sound, that would obviously be a minus because it's not correct, and you could also make note of the vowel sound that they used. And if you have the ability on your computer to type that, the bar across the O, you could just do that, or you could just write long O. Okay, checking to make sure I said everything I needed to about this assessment. Yes. So essentially when they're done, you're going to know their percentage of automatic word recognition that they have on that functioning, on that level, and you're going to know their functioning level on each of these word lists. And it's the same process if you want to use the Fry list. You can just write your things, your notations and your scores right down the side here. You can submit this as your record form. You could submit this as your record form. It doesn't matter to me which one you choose. Same process with the Fry list though. If they're getting less than 70% on any one batch of 100 words, so that one's pretty easy to calculate. If they're able to read 70 of them, then you're going to keep going up and up the word list. You can see how the Fry assessment would take much longer if your student was really good at reading words. And if they are at that 70%, you would obviously, or below it, you would want to stop. That's their frustration level. Okay, so you've got the coding and scoring behaviors, and then the next assessment we'll look at is the graded writing assessment. I'm going to breeze through this one because I want you all, you're required to give the words their way assessment, and this one's another spelling assessment. It's quite similar to that assessment, and I don't want you to give this one instead of spelling. However, if you work with a student and on the spelling inventory you notice something funky, or you want to dig for more information, or you see something that you're going, I wonder what happened there. Was that just a fluky day, or what's going on? This could be a good assessment to help give you more information. So you first need to give words their way, and if it raises some issues for you or you have questions, you could give this as a way to dig a little bit deeper. So this assessment is going to assess their orthography or their spelling of the high frequency words. Again, you can use the Fry word list, so you would just administer this as a basic spelling test for the student, or you can use the list that they've prepared here that's going to have a lot of the same words as, maybe all the same words as the graded reading list. So for this one, it is slightly different because it's a writing assessment. The biggest thing that you need to know about this is that they want you to give the words in a sentence, and they don't provide the sentence. So you've either got to be able to think in the moment of sentences, which is, if you've ever tried to do that, it's actually very difficult to do. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to give this assessment, that you come up with your sentences beforehand so that you're not trying to fumble and come up with a sentence. And it says for your procedures, so I'm looking on the bottom of page 135, the teacher's going to make a copy of the graded, the writing words assessment. And in this case, you don't have a word list copy because it's a spelling test. So they're going to be writing. You got to give them a piece of paper. You can have lined or unlined. You can have that paper with the line, the middle line for your students, whatever works, whatever they're used to. Kindergartners and first graders with poor fine motor coordination can be given unlined paper. Other students can be given any kind of paper. Give them a paper that would be appropriate for them. If they're in third grade and up, you can use a sheet of regular lined paper and they can fold it to make 2 columns, because this could carry on quite long if you've got an older student who's able to spell a lot. Okay, so if you're using Fry, you're going to start with the very first word. That's how the Fry assessment works. You always kind of start in the first 100 and go up until they can't go up anymore. But if you are giving the graded writing words assessment, you're going to select a list that is, again, 2 grade levels below the student's current grade level, unless there's evidence that would show that you should drop even lower than that. So if they're third grade, you're going to start with that first grade assessment. If they're second grade, you'll start with the kindergarten or primer level. So then if you have an emergent writer, the first thing you're going to ask them to do is write their name. Can you write your first and last name like it says here? And so, sorry, I lost my place. For an emergent writer, the teacher first asks the student to write their first and last name and any words that the student knows. So you can actually ask them to write any words that you know if they're in that pre-primer. These are, your pre-K students or your first grade students. So you're going to ask them to write any words that they know. Then you're actually going to start giving them the word list. Read each word one at a time, provide a sentence using the word, and then read that word again. Typical spelling test format. It's especially important to provide sentences for words that have homophones, which are indicated with an asterisk. So anytime you see like 4 has obviously the homonym for like the number 4, you'd want to give them a good sentence like, I got a gift for my birthday, so that they know exactly which one you are referring to. The student should be reminded to write letters for the sounds in each word, even if the student is not sure how to spell the word. And after dictating each word, you're going to write a plus sign above the ones that they spell correctly on your record form. Incorrect, you're going to write what they wrote. Make sure you indicate any reversals or capital letters. Indicate exactly what they wrote. And then put a comma between each attempt that they make and use SC for self-correct. You could also use that check mark for the self-correct. If they, again, get above a 70% on any given list or column, you go to the next one. And if they don't, you drop back if you didn't already give that assessment, or you stop. So for this assessment, the functioning levels are 18 out of 20 is considered independent. Instructional is going to be, again, 70% to 89, which for this is 14 to 17. Frustration is going to be 13. So this one is pretty simple scoring. You're going to do however many you actually get through and administer, and it's 20 per list. You're going to count up how many they had correct. So it would be 15 out of 20 and come up with your percentage. And then your developmental stage is based on the percentage that you get or the number correct that you get. So let's say they had 14 out of 20 on this first list, you would call that instructional level. Okay. You are also going to identify the words that the student can write automatically, and then also the ones that the student has to sound out, so using their phonics and their knowledge of words. So you want to make note of the ones that they are experiencing a lot of difficulty in trying to sound out. Okay. There's also a little bonus table that you see right here, which is a table that shows the developmental spelling stages. And this can be used to evaluate each word again. So you could say that, oh, that's what this part is for, developmental stage. So if the student on this list spends a lot of time scribbling letter-like forms, letters that don't represent sounds, it's going to be pre-phonetic. If they have some sound symbol relationships, one or two of the letters could represent a whole word, that's semi-phonetic. If most of the sounds are represented graphically and vowels are even used, even if they're incorrect, that's phonetic. Transitional, most words are correct. Incorrectly spelled words are contain letters representing all the sounds, that's transitional. And conventional spelling, of course, is 96% of the words are spelled correctly. So you can also give them a designation there on their developmental spelling stage. Another thing that you can do is combine this with a later assessment. We'll look at the handwriting rubric assessment to compare their handwriting to the standards. Okay, and then let me just make sure I hit all of the things I needed to say. So, like I said before, give the words their way assessment. If you come up with some interesting findings or you want to dig deeper, you are welcome to give this graded writing words assessment. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is sentence dictation. So this assessment is very simple and easy to give, and the instructions are on page 138 in the text. This is used to identify your students' known writing words, as well as their ability to divide words they hear into their sounds, which is phonemic segmentation. This assessment bridges phonemic awareness and phonics and orthography. So they have to write the letter or letters that represent the sounds that they hear, and they can use analogies for known words to help them spell new words. So these sentences were created to incorporate as many graphemes as possible in the fewest words in the context of a little short story. So the way that you give this assessment, there are 3 different dictation stories. There's pre-primer and primer level, which has 41 graphemes. First and second grade level writers are assessed on 50 different graphemes, and those who are at or above third grade level are going to do 153 graphemes and controlled vowels. So it can be administered to an older student if the student scores below the 5th grade level on that graded writing word assessment. So you give that one first. If they get below 5th grade level, you can give this assessment as well. Paper with line widths appropriate for your student's age should be used, and then there's a little script for what the teacher says. So you give them some line paper and you say, I'm going to read you a story, and then I will go back and read one word at a time. Write down each word I say. If you do not know how to write a word, say the word to yourself and write down the letters for the sounds you hear. And the student is to write these words in sentence format, not in a list. So it should be written out like a sentence. You are welcome to repeat the words as many times as you need to. You can stretch the words out for them, but you're not obviously going to help them spell. That is the point of this assessment. But you'll have to go back word by word and dictate the sentence for them. The scoring is going to look pretty familiar for this assessment. Above each word, you're going to write a plus sign for the correct spelling, a minus sign for deleted or omitted words or phonemes, and you're going to record all of the incorrect spellings that your students do. Then the teacher will count each correct underlined grapheme and record the total. The functioning level is the percentage of correct graphemes written. So notice here the sentence is, I like to have fun with my dog. He can jump and get balls. So if it's correct, you're going to, they tell you to do it above, which makes sense because there's a little more space. Above each correct one, you're going to put a plus sign. So I like, and let's say they don't do that E there, let's say they miss that E, you would put a dash. If the word is to and they get both of them, have, let's say they spell it H-A, let's say they do F here, that would be a miss, and then they leave the E off. Fun, let's say they do F-I-N. So anytime they make a mistake, you're going to put what they write, and if it's deleted or omitted, you're going to put a negative sign, a minus sign. And then you're going to go through and count up all of the plus signs that the student includes. So it will give you the grand total score right here, and it tells you out of 41 phonemes. So let's say the student got, 31 out of 41. I'm grabbing my calculator because I cannot do that math in my brain. That would be 75.6, so we can round up. That would be a 77%. So on this assessment, if they got 31 of the graphemes out of 41, that would be at the instructional level. Notice that when the grapheme represents a phoneme that has two letters making one sound, like the TH here in with, that is only one grapheme. That is only one possible point. They have to have both of those letters present in order to get a point for that sound. Same thing down here for balls. They have to have both of those L's in order to have a point there. Okay, let me check the text and make sure I said everything. So if the student scores at or above the instructional level, you're going to go to the next highest. You're always, on this assessment too, on all of them, you're on the hunt for their instructional level. Once you get that instructional level, you can really stop. You could test up to frustration, but you don't have to. The process continues until frustration level is reached. That always makes me uncomfortable. It tells you to do it, so you should do it. But if you get the instructional level, that's really what you're after. That's what I'm most excited to see. So to analyze the sentence dictation, identify the correct and incorrect graphemes or spelling patterns in order to plan your instruction. In the story for third grade and above, those spelling patterns that are not individual graphemes, such as consonant blends, controlled vowels, are indicated by double underlines. So I pointed that out so you can see, double underlines. Third grade and above. I don't see any double underlines. I'm not sure what they mean. Are controlled vowels. Oh, early. So I see they combine the E, the A, and the R here. I don't see any other R controlled vowels. So for early, I would mark that as one phoneme. They have to have all of those sounds represented accurately in order to get that correct. There's another R controlled here. Another thing you'll note when you get up to the higher levels is that they're not, I see, the ones that are underlined are the ones that are blended. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to keep reading the text to make sure I don't miss anything. In the analysis section, the headings in the again, you can refer back to the individual phonics survey if you are recording the patterns of correct and incorrect graphemes. And you can also be checking for punctuation and capitalization as well as handwriting. So this is another assessment where you could combine with the handwriting rubric that we're going to look at now. So the sentence dictation assessment is a good one if you notice that your student is experiencing some spelling difficulties. Maybe they weren't quite to that spelling level that you were expecting, or the teacher says to you, the student really needs help with this. And this can give you a good sense of, first of all, they're writing within the context of a sentence, a full sentence or a story, but it also can show you that important connection between their phonemic awareness, what they're hearing, and their ability with phonics and what they're able to actually write and put on the page, and of course orthography, their spelling. Okay, the last one we're going to look at here is the handwriting assessment, and this one is, you can find it on the very bottom of page 140 to 141 in the text, and this is really used to determine a student's strengths and areas for improvement with their handwriting. So this can be used with any writing assessment that you've given, any writing sample, any writing that you've got from the student. You can use this to assess their specific development in handwriting. using the criteria that's listed in this rubric here, under the columns labeled exceeded, which is here, met here, did not meet here, you're going to mark a plus sign, a check mark, or a minus sign for each of the standards. So you also want to have a good sense of the school adopted style of writing that the students have learned. If they know any verbal pathways for writing the letters, you're going to want to pay attention to that. And then things like letter formation, spacing, directionality, reversals, capitalizations, those things can all be captured here. So if you take a closer look, you've got that student's writing sample in front of you. Letters were easily recognizable, always, mostly, rarely. So on that one writing piece, you're going to make a judgment call here and give it either a plus, a check, or a minus. Letters were formed correctly, always, mostly, rarely. So this one is really, can you just recognize what letter they're writing? This one is it formed correctly? So maybe you can recognize them, but they're not necessarily formed perfectly correctly. I would give that a check mark. Letters started and ended in the correct place. Maybe they don't do that at all. And on this one, you're going to give them a minus. They're really not starting and ending in the right place at all. Letters placed correctly within the lines. Say they got that. Letters were usually spaced properly. Maybe they're having a few issues with spacing, but it's not super bad. Usually, words were usually spaced appropriately. This is one that is often difficult for emergent writers. They can put space between letters. They're not putting their letters right on top of each other, but maybe that in between words is not spaced well, and we teach students, to put a finger between words. Return sweep is used properly, and then capital letters used properly. Let's say they're struggling with that too. So for this assessment, it's not meant to give you like a percentage score or you to be able to say, their functioning level. It really is meant to just be a quick check-in with your students. You want to check against the standards here, and that's what you're going to use to teach your students. So if you've got a couple of minus signs, you're going to go through, and that's where you provide your handwriting support to your student. So you are welcome. This is sort of like a bonus assessment that you could give anytime you're giving a written assessment. Since you all have to give the spelling inventory, you could also give the handwriting rubric. Your goal here in this class is to build up a rich portfolio of data for your focus student so that when it comes time to make some instructional decisions, you have a lot to pull from. You've got a wide repertoire of information to choose from in order to make your informed decisions. All of your instructional decisions should be data-driven in this class. And where's your data coming from? The assessments. So use your best judgment when you're giving assessments in this set. I would love to see you giving the graded reading words assessment. You will be giving the words their way spelling inventory. If you've got time to give another one, you might want to give the sentence dictation one. That's a nice complement to the two that you've given already. And then the handwriting rubric assessment doesn't require any extra time with the student, so it's a good one to just throw in there as well. Okay, have fun giving your assessments in this week, and I hope that it yields lots of really good information for you about your focus student.